Welcome to ThriveCast, and with me I have Maja Voje, the famed Maja Voje. She is a globally recognized growth advisor and practitioner. She's advising so many companies, small startups, big startups. She's worked in Google, Rocket Internet, and so many other places. Maya, you also have a new book coming up, and you've been doing lots and lots of podcasts on product led. Recently, I attended the product drive. I was telling you just before the call. Welcome to ThriveCast, Maya. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Every time somebody reads my intro, I get a little bit cringed because I don't know. Yeah, I have been working for a decade or something like that. But for me, I'm very real as a person. So what I soon realized is that if you are working with a big company such as Bayer, Heineken, or Google or Rocket Internet, it's not the same as if you are like this bootstrap startup, right? So my frustration, my pain, my mission is to actually translate what is good of that science and develop what else do we need in order to securely come to the product market fit and do just a little bit better than the stat that 95% of innovation will fail. So this is how I am. How are you?
This is amazing, Maya. So I've been listening to you. I've been watching you on the product led podcast. You've done so many of the podcasts. You've talked to so many of the people. So here's my chance to pick your brains, and do a reverse podcast, if you will, instead of you being the host and someone like me being a guest. We'll do the reverse, and I'm going to pick some of your brains. After having you talk to so many early stage startups, after having talked to lots and lots of these companies, I want to kind of gauge on a particular topic today, which is about early stage startups and technical founders. How should they really think about the PLG journey, specifically if they want to get into the growth side of the story? How should they start? So let me start with maybe a very broad question. Do you see growth very different for maybe a small stage startup versus mid to large size companies? Do you want to start from there on why should small companies start thinking about growth right away?
Yeah, cool. So ultimately, we are all building scalable and foreseeable ways how to win business, right? So I don't like words marketing and growth and sales and like all these weird camp. But look, if you don't have money on your bank account, you have no business. Simple as that. So in order to secure the existence of your business, you have to sell or just like gain some funding. And that's pretty much it. That's mission critical for you. And as you are developing the product, you are also testing like product market fit and developing a business model at the same time. Because the majority of us, when we're doing startups, we have like 3 or maybe 6 months of lifeline in order to make it or break it. That's it. And just like today, I had a little call with a founder who's applying next week for Y Combinator, and
Hmm.
he's like a typical technical founder. So he's trying to avoid personal contact at all possible costs. And he was just like texting me all the time. And I was like, listen, we have to go to the call. We have to align. We have to like resolve this. And he was like, okay, next week I am pitching and I need to have 500 signups for my beta. And I was thinking about scraping emails of some of the salespeople in the UK. And I was like, listen, I had like stories when founders, just like with one post on social media groups. So I have a 9K Facebook group here, and I have cases like with one post, they got 200 registrations or something like that. And I was literally like, why are you making this more difficult than it needs to be? Because you are trying to avoid being exposed or just like making sure that like you are talking to people or something like that. So I do think that a lot of us are introverts and that we have certain biases towards certain channels and growth techniques. If you have a product market fit, customer acquisition cost, you gain some referrals and something beautiful is going on in your product without you necessarily investing your human touch. But in order to get there, we do things that don't scale, such as posting in a Facebook group, such as going out and speaking on a conference, or actually like do sales calls ourselves. And I'm always like, despite all these biases of avoiding direct human to human communication, I'm just like, listen, if that will be mission critical, would you do it? If your company's survival depended on that, would you do it? And that adds up a wonderful perspective into what is mission critical and what is a must win battle.
So all these young founders, millennial founders, looks like talking to people is a very difficult ordeal. I think even the buyers and the users' behaviors have changed, right? I think I was maybe looking at some of a preview of your book, and you mentioned that the behaviors of the buyers have changed so much so that people don't want to talk to people anymore. So talking about that, and I'm touching upon the introvertness of the founder. uh, how do they, well, could you maybe provide some baseline guidance of uh, should they start thinking about product led growth from the very outset as they are building their company? Typically, I see founders in US act very differently than in Asia Pacific, than in Europe. Many of them, because of the age-old wisdom of sales-led growth, sometimes you know kind of bank upon SLG as their primary way of business. So, could you maybe help maybe establish a basic fact of should they think, if it's an early stage founder, maybe even a technical founder, should they think about product-led growth as the first go-to-market strategy? What are your thoughts about that?
No, it all depends on on the customer journey, right? So a couple of weeks ago, my husband and I we bought our first Mercedes Benz, and it's a beautiful car. But I would never, ever, ever buy it. Thank you, appreciate it. It's a gorgeous car. But nevertheless, look, I would never buy it via internet, right? I would never buy something that costs like 70K, like without driving it, without feeling it, without touching it, without having this feeling of confidence and joy as I try this. So the first factor is there is a different customer journey and there is a different price range, because if I'm buying something very complex, even as a B2B organization, for example like a CRM or like a new
Hmm.
accounting on ERP software, it's impossible that I would just like play around a little bit without intersecting with a human being on at least like a sales score or something like that, because I'm just too stupid to understand it. And not just too stupid, I don't think that I would have to work that hard without being guided in order to understand the product before I am convinced that it provides me some value added. And nowadays, when it comes to the majority of digital products, you have to give before you get, right? So this principle is very, very, very important. Is this saturated arena with AI on emergence and everything like that, and you have to like experience a fraction of the value of at least like build or establish some trust before you are ready to take it for a spin, because otherwise why should you care in the first place? And just like the other side of the equation to is cost, right? If you sell
Hmm.
something at like 30 euros of subscriptions per month, or sorry, you're into dollars. But if something is really cheap, if your like annual contract is approximately 600 euros, it would literally cost you more to sell it than you would make of a client. So in order for that like unit economics business model to work, you need volume in order to achieve critical mass. We'll talk about pricing later on
Hmm.
extensively, but these are like kind of variables how I think about this. Is product led on point and cool? Yes. Is it always applicable? Contrary to my dear friend's opinion, West Bush, I don't really think so.
So what I think what you're saying, Maya, is that if the price range is slightly on the lower side, and if your ICP is
It's a must.
more or less, yeah, then in that case, product-led growth might be the right way. Let's,
It's almost a must, because just like if you
yeah.
are investing in ads, you know that if like you are in the US or something like that, it will cost you at least $100 in order to sell something, right? You can definitely not afford like the salesperson. You maybe cannot even afford an acquisition through ads. So you have to be clever about this. You need leverage. I'm definitely pro product-led growth, but I don't want people that use it as an excuse not to go on a sales course, because sometimes sales course are needed.
Yeah, so maybe extending that. Let's say the founders they decide that product-led growth is the right fit for them,
Mhm.
and we'll talk a little in the later on the call about how do they go build their product. But let's say they have a self-serve product. How do they bring an initial awareness to their product? they may not have enough
Oh,
marketing
that's a good
dollar.
one. That's a
So
good
I'm
one. And
talking,
we,
yeah,
Mhm.
I'm talking about leading the founders, essentially starting the journey on initial awareness of their self-service PLG product. How do they think they generally do it?
hmm So again, there are two types of channels: the ones that we like as technical founders, and the
Hmm.
ones that we try to avoid at all possible costs. The ones that we like are surprise, surprise, low touch. And
Hmm.
this is like a typical PLG. So just like thinking that building it and people will magically come and refer others to the product, that doesn't work that way. Usually we have like a little bit of automated stuff, for example, with advertising, with search ads, or even like outreach. This is what we like to do, right? We like to
Hmm.
scrape, we like to get rid of this, we like to automate things, which is great. But you know, the problem is that sometimes you might automate something which is broken and have the wrong messages. So it still pays off a little bit to test it manually on a smaller center before you go hardcore. And then we have like another bias which comes to channel, right? And for example, a lot of technical people are thinking, oh, nobody clicks to ads, ads are stupid, I have gazillion ad blockers here. Or just like Instagram, what this is for influencers, this is how women buy lipsticks, this is not how B2B companies are behaving. So we should go on Twitter, Discord, Reddit, the serious channel. And by the way, I don't like LinkedIn because people are harassing me on LinkedIn and I don't want to be perceived as crying CEO, right? So these are those type of biases. But nevertheless, just like in terms of how our mental models work, it's really, really, really simple. I was working with a company that was producing liquid system for automated cars a while back, and they were trying to do like a marketing strategy. And I was like, what the fuck? You are working with 5 development centers for cars and you know everybody. So just write a freaking email. So listen, friend Henry, for the sake of an example, where do you get the majority of information that you need for your research and development work? What fairs do you visit? Do you follow any influencer? Is there some professional group that you like to participate with? What makes you smart? What makes you intelligent about the job? And the channel selection, first of all, needs to be adjusted to the ICP that you are targeting. And you can easily find this down by asking them, right? You don't have to go into testing like in a gazillion different channels in order to find the ones, because usually it's very, very, very simple. At the beginning on, in leasing services businesses, you will get like 70% of business through the referrals. This is how it is. And for just like swiping your phone and finding a couple of people, a couple of friends that will buy from you or refer you further. And it's simple like this. To get to 100 customers, it's literally dumb as that. But that doesn't mean that you have a product market fit, right? Because you should still build a scalable machine, and that comes down to having an analytics, to having attribution system, to know where your customers are coming from, and then eventually as you experiment you learn how to find more of those customers. And this was a very long answer, but yeah, this is like a very boiling question for me because I hear it on a daily basis.
This is super. And you know what I think what you're trying to say is that there are the techniques for PLG is slightly or very different than the SLG, right? In your case, what you're mentioning is invest in marketing website, invest in some automation about your messaging and narrative, invest in SEOs, maybe get out there, have conversations with people, maybe community building and stuff like that. So maybe let me ask maybe a slightly different question. In the SLG
Mhm,
world,
mhm.
and a founder would go and hit up the ICP cold calls or whatever that might be, and have so many conversations. I think you and I we've touched upon that some time back. Is that some of these founders will spend 30, 40 calls a week, talking to their ICPs. But in the
Oh, of
PLG world,
shitlets, yeah.
I'm guessing things would be very different, right? If you have your product out there, and then leads are more inbound rather than outbound. How do you qualify these customers? Maybe start off with, is this the right idea to not have conversations with customers in the very first go? I'm talking purely early stage startups, right? So they don't have a market fit yet. They don't have a product market fit yet. but yet sometimes they avoid having conversations with customers with the hope that the end customers or the users will find value directly on their website or directly going to the product and assume that they might find some values. How do you what would be your advice on how should they think about customer conversations? Definitely to avoid some of these calls, but make it much more qualified for their customers.
Literally by revamping it as learning and helping people, right?
Hmm.
So as a founder, you are probably very passionate how to solve a specific problem. This is how you went in business, and in order to solve it efficiently, you need feedback loops, and you can measure feedback by having a good analytic system. That's cool, but you don't necessarily understand why. In order to help users use your product more successfully, it's very good to just like go on a hop on a call with them and learn what they need, what they don't like. And I just like reframe it that selling and research is helping. It's our best attempt to be like the most effective in solving this problem possible. And I don't necessarily think that there is a clear differentiation between product and sales led world, because if you look at Amplitude or Zoom or like all the famous PLG companies, they all have like an enterprise or custom package, right? So whenever you don't personalize programs and pricing packages to different personas, you are leaving money on the table. And
Hmm.
in my world, there are two and more way how to make like 10K a month, which is like maybe a lifeline for the majority of, let's say, solopreneurs or like really small things. It's like you can sell 10 packages for 1,000 euros, or you can sell 100 packages for 100 euros. So, what would your ICP buy? And the good news is that you can even change the target audience if you can still deliver value, right? So, when it comes to deciding whether it's product led or not, we are optimizing for adoption here. And whenever a product would have better value added if you have more users to it, for example, networking apps, for example, social media, and all the other plenty of users, you are optimizing for adoption, not necessarily profit. So it would benefit you more to have more users at more reasonable price in order to deliver more value. This is the better game. How would you play it? But again, it depends on the product category and what can you optimize for, because sometimes we just need money on the bank account and we cannot invest in getting like 1,000 users.
So, what you're saying is optimize. I mean, I like it. I'll probably even quote it sometime later as well.
Go.
Optimize for adoption versus optimize for pricing. It's difficult, for early stage founders when they are either cash strapped or they have very less cash flow. I mean,
Mhm.
remember they might be either bootstrap at that particular stage, and depending upon the VC winter is on or not, they may not have actually raised much money. In such a case, optimize for adoption, might be a death knell for them. So they might get, if they plan to monetize after 6 months to a year's time, that's a large amount of time when they don't have the money. So how do they think in this day and age? Is there a balance to be had between adoption versus pricing? I know we'll touch upon pricing a little bit, but maybe some thoughts on how do you think about optimizing for adoption at an early stage company? Is that
I
is
don't
that
think
is that
much.
difficult?
Yeah, I don't think much. I just do things that are mission critical. So each day I start by sitting down and writing down three priorities and what is like absolutely mission critical to achieve, which objective. And I make all the decisions through the prism if it is mission critical for me to achieve this objective. That gives you a wonderful line of permission to say no, because what is focus? It's all about saying no, right? And that is like a really, really, really good prism into first deciding of what must you achieve in order to secure the existence of your business, and then just like to reframe all the rest clutter, like all the like shiny object syndromes and opportunities out there through the prism, how likely it is going to help me take there. And of course, like, you shouldn't lose the product vision on a go, right? Because I had mentored a company that was selling analytical solutions, and they accidentally sold something to Walmart which costed like a couple of 10,000 K a year, not a month. And then like the team was hijacked for working for this client. It was just like a company with a white client, or like making sure that the service runs because they had this contract. So in terms of customer co-creation, you shouldn't be like changing yourself into a company that serves a market of one. That's very dangerous, because you just become this internal agency and you no longer have your vision and your roadmap. It sucks. Later on, you can just like play around with segmentation a little bit and select the segments with higher willingness to pay. So even though it is not your ideal persona, your ideal segment from a get-go, there are some people with a burning pain that you can solve this problem to good enough, well enough, in order to bootstrap that revenue into your future development. There are always things that we can do. Just like the problem is that we have to do things that are mission critical. And if your mission critical is to get like 50K on the bank account, this is what you should be optimizing for. Sorry.
That's very interesting. So, I was taking notes as speak. Market of one. I've seen that happen. I
Mm-hmm.
think you mentioned about the case with Walmart. I've actually met one AI founder here in Seattle, and they started selling to Amazon, right?
Looks
It's a
good on
market.
paper, huh?
It looks good on paper, and then that's the first customer, and now they are stuck with it. Um, Touching upon that, right? So, you mentioned about segmentation. You mentioned about going slightly broader. Um,
So, sorry to interrupt, but there is just one strategy that I would love to mention here. So it's pre-selling, and just like making sure that you are not building something that market doesn't want. So whenever I have an innovation in mind, I like to test it by selling it on a couple of demo calls with either a PDF or just like a PowerPoint. This is how I call my Google Slides, or a mirror board, and just like talking it through if people would be able to pledge the money on it. So I like to sell it before I ever build it, whenever this is possible, so that I'm not wasting a lot of effort into building some freaking Frankenstein that nobody would like. And it's also very motivating for me if I do it, because whenever I do that and have a social commitment that I should finish something by a certain day, otherwise other people are going to be very mad at
Mhm.
me, I do it.
Reselling, that's an amazing technique. So, tell me more a little about it, Maya. So when you are doing this pre-selling, and I saw that your GTM strategist book as well, right? You mentioned about, hey, this if this is what I build, would you buy it? Would you also, I know you have talked about, talk about the pains, talk about the gains associated, to the product that you sell, but would you also put pricing as part of your
Yes.
pre-selling?
Oh, definitely, definitely, especially if you are bootstrapping, because not only are you testing product, market, and business model at the same time, the question to ask is, would they buy it at this price? And
Hmm.
willingness to pay is actually a very, very, very important differentiator, because I've seen companies that have been building these media machines and like Instagram followerships or LinkedIn followerships, or forgive me for saying this, but the audience with very limited to no willingness to pay. It's just like vanity metrics. These are just like likes and hoorays and you, my man, go, go. So it has very little to do with just like generating and creating demand that is willing to pay. So this is absolutely mission critical to test, especially if you don't have like an investment, sizable investment, or a lot of lifeline. You have to do this. You shouldn't mess around. So I guess the next question would be, how do we test willingness to pay, right? And the
Hmm.
answer is never ask this directly. I did this mistake once, and it was one of the cringy sales meetings that I ever had, right? So I was on this discovery call and I presented this service concept to a guy, and I was like, now listen, how much would you be willing to pay for that? And he like literally did a face palm and he was like, I don't know, I have never bought this before. I don't think it exists. I have no references. Why are you asking me this? And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because just like it's not customer jobs to do the pricing for you, it's your freaking job. I mean, you can collect feedback and you can like learn a lot from interacting with the market, but at least like have a little bit of an inception. And reality, at least in GTM, is to be trapped in this wiggle room of 20 to 30% from your competitors. So people will always have an alternative, even though it is an Excel sheet or something like that. But if there is a problem, trust me, they are solving it somehow. And you should figure it out how and how much can they invest in it. So there is this wiggle room, but there is also like this opportunity to position yourself. And positioning, like, I mean, it's not that we could be the next Apple from the get-go by going on a stage and doing this revolutionary keynote. No, like usually we just have to make sure that we are selling to people with decent willingness to pay, that everything flows nicely, because if they don't have a burning pain and willingness to pay for this, you have no business. And you can have a pipeline of how many leads you want, but if you're not getting any money in, your chances of survival are either slim. So yeah, I was going on a rant how to do willingness to pay testing. Do you have any questions to add, or do we move to methods how we actually do this?
Yeah, no, no, maybe tell me a little more about the willingness to pay. I know you mentioned that
Yes.
it's not the customer's choice to say how
No.
much are they willing to pay. It is the seller, it is the startup who has to do it. So how do they go about thinking about pricing plans? I know I think you and I have touched upon this. This is also very regional. Startups in Europe and Asia, they underprice their products. Startups in the US, they overprice their products. Sometime back, I think you and I we also touched about that. If you ask them a direct question in the US, they won't cringe about it, but in Asia and in Europe, they would cringe about it.
Wow,
So
that's interesting.
so how should they think about pricing plans? I know there's so many methods, so many options there. Maybe if you could illuminate the subject a little more.
Cool. So maybe just like to address psychological barriers at first, at least like here in Europe and in Asia, talking about money is not perceived very nicely, right? So you need to be a little bit secretive, a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
shy about your monies. This is the cultural norm here. And it's also not a very nice thing in our culture if somebody makes a lot more money than other people. So whenever you make like 5 times as much as your mother, some of the other stuff, and also you are anchoring, you are comparing what you're making as a business with your previous paycheck. And very little people know how is are things with taxations before they are founders themselves, right? And they are like, if I did that for 8 hours a week before, and just like right now, is it okay to charge 5 times as much? Like it gets a little bit off. So the proxy that I like to use here is the value metric. Here, things are very simple. We are literally, price is just a mechanism of capturing the value that is being created through the product, and we exchange this value with the customer. How to measure value? Sometimes it's very easy. For example, if you get me a client that will
Mhm.
spend 50K with me, it's very logical for me to pay you 5K for your business development services, because we can measure how much value did I get directly, and we can agree on this exchange beforehand because we know exactly where we stand. But things are not always simple, and that makes life more interesting. For example, one of my partners is Amplitude, right? And it is an analytical system. It's a digital platform to gain insights on products and on digital customer journeys. So their North Star metric, this is like the most important metric that describes the value that users are getting from the product, is weekly learning users. Whereas I could never, ever, ever discover how much value am I getting from the product if I'm observing some retention cohort,
Mhm.
and they would never ever get the feedback loop how it influenced my business directly. Just like the activity of engaging in the product and actively learning, actively increasing the business smarts of this has value. So that's a very important one. Not always is that very easy to do, because sometimes we use even like easier proxies. For example, number of users, number of accounts created, then number of transactions. So we don't always have this perfect feedback loop of value exchange, but we can always find a proxy, some sort of metric candidate that indicates, okay, if they're consuming more of this, that definitely means that they are doing better and the product is continuing more value. And something else is true. So we are very afraid of raising the prices. But whenever you are like literally developing and like releasing a new version of product, you are delivering higher value added, and you should consider rather raising the price or creating like some sort of difference in the packages. Value, think value, not price. Price is a number that you put on value exchange.
I'm noting down so many of the tidbits that you mentioned.
Yes,
Keyword,
finally,
keyword.
finally. I
Yeah.
had imposter syndrome before coming to this call. Yes.
So you mentioned anchoring. You mentioned try before you buy. You mentioned value-based pricing. You mentioned about uh, you know. Uh, could you tell maybe let's start with the story, right? The story is that this is an early stage founder, and
Mhm,
they haven't yet sold their product to any customers yet. And some of the
mhm.
customers they've been talking to, have been trying their product, right, with kind of completely unbeknownst to them on what they would price it. So how should you, what advice would you have for this early stage founder on to have that value based pricing conversation with the customer? And I'm hoping that you wouldn't say like just like the Austin Powers would say $100 million, right?
No,
how
no,
do you
no, no. And I
how would
won't
you
say
price it?
like double it, and then added zero either. But I will do an experiment with you if
Yeah,
you're okay with it. With
absolutely.
something which is like really even more difficult to estimate the value than technology product. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a piece of art. This
Mm-hmm.
is a piece of art, a wonderful illustration by our local artist. It can be worth a lot or it can be worth very little. So I will do the willingness to pay test with you now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gururai, would you
Yeah.
pay $100 for this?
No.
Okay. Would you pay 50?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Would you pay 70?
No, I would pay less than 50.
Okay. Would you pay 30?
Maybe.
Okay. Would you pay 40?
No.
Okay. Willingness to pay is approximately 30
30.
$30. I think it was
So
much more
I think,
expensive. It's my
yeah.
collector piece, but okay, for you, it's worth that much. Okay, I just learned by doing an auction with you that, and that testing is called Gabor Granger method. And this is like a very, very, very weird way how to do think about the pricing, but this is how we do it in real life. Like we like put down an offer and we put a price tag on it, and then we test it, and whenever we see this ceiling, like whenever it doesn't land anymore, there is appears to be like a little bit of an issue, and this is where we're trapped. So just
You're
like
right.
from
You're
doing
right.
just
Yeah,
like
I
from
think
doing
you're
this, you
right.
can learn a
So,
lot.
so I think, this experiment, also teaches me something. So maybe we could do another experiment primarily around
Yes.
anchoring. So let's say uh, this is $200 remote.
Hmm.
Okay. How much would you pay for this one? This is a different one. This is
Okay.
200. How much would you pay for
Hmm.
this?
Okay, now he's comparing two products, and one of them has like a little bit more technical design, but this is like a
Yeah.
remote control. I
Yeah.
know that like remote controls cost approximately up to $50, so that would be my ridiculously expensive price range. And I know that whatever you buy for less than 10 euros, it's way too cheap, right? So I would price it and I would offer it between like maybe 20 bucks or something like that for it. But I would have to learn more about the differentiation. And what he did now, how we explain this is another research method. So when we did the auction, it was Gabor Granger. Now we are playing Van Pasterdorp, and I'm so thrilled because you naturally went into this space as I could talk you from my mental process, how I would think about pricing, right? So I have some pre existing perceptions. Then I have like a little bit of customer experience. Then I'm trying to negotiate with you a little bit to find a better deal because I'm a sneaky bastard as well. And you would probably have to do 200 of those tests in order to find your real price. But if you don't have the opportunity to do a bunch of interviews or like a full blown A B test, you can still learn a lot from just like running a couple of demo calls, discovery calls with a couple of customers. And even if they say no, you ask them why. Your power of learning is when you are asking the why question, right? And even if they refuse the offer, ask why they refuse the offer. This is how you learn, this is how you improve, and this is how you get better at communicating this. Because I will tell you a little trick. What I do to my clients is that I'm literally doing the mental math of ROIs for them, right? So whenever I have an offer
Hmm.
out there, I'm just like not even negotiating the price. I'm just like, listen, this will cost you 10 grand. If you think that by doing all this you won't get like free additional customers and you want free X on this, then we don't have a discussion. We can just like drop the meeting just right now. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way of reframing it, because cost is a pain, right? When somebody tells you a cost, like a price, it pains you a little bit. It's like
Yeah,
feels like snapping.
it
You're
does.
losing something. But if you reframe it into a benefit conversation, in ROI conversation, and you can provide evidence that this will definitely work, and like savings and like the additional benefit and all the other sweet old benefits of B2B that could be at least approximately measured, you have a different conversation. It just flows much nicer.
Yeah, I think I'm loving this conversation, Maya. I think you mentioned a couple of things. I'm just trying to recollect. The first one is you mentioned about kind of an auctioning where you're doing suggested prices and you're giving ranges, and then
Yeah.
we talked about some kind of an anchoring, kind of comparing one versus the other,
Yeah.
and the
So,
third.
so just like sorry, just like to revamp. So, what is too cheap? What is so cheap that you would literally like doubt the quality? That was the
Yeah,
remote control experiment. Then, what would be cheap? So, AKA a bargain. What would be expensive that you would? Am I really getting this value? And what would be outrageously
yeah,
expensive? What would be
yeah,
like?
yeah, yeah.
These are the ranges that you are trying to do based on investment often. But nevertheless, look, when you are an early stage founder, you are not doing like scientific tests. The most probably that you can do is a survey, an A/B test, or just like running a couple of sales points. This is realistically so.
Voila, I think that's the trigger. So you start off with some range, some price point, and then experiment with it. What do you think? Maybe slightly different question. What do you think about try before you buy kind of a scenario? Could be either a trial plan, a reverse trial plan, a freemium plan. Do startups think about it from the very get go at the at the conversation when they're having that with the customers, or they should think about, hey, this is my ballpoint, this is my approximate range for the pricing. Why don't you try it? Do they generally go like that, or do they think about, let me go start with free trial? Do they have a very uh, you know intentional, a purposed way to go and sell, which is, let me start with free trial, let me experiment with it, and then we'll base the pricing based on some numbers and then experiment with it. What do you see out there in the market?
I see a trap. I literally
Okay.
see a trap, because if you don't assign a value to it, it's not
Mm-hmm.
valuable. I mean, if you are just like giving it to for free without having like at least an early anchoring that there could be a package, They could even like raise customer concerns, such as, okay,
Hmm.
this is something, it's for cool or free, I will give it a shot, but is this business serious? Is it safe? Will they answer customer tickets? Are they going to be around for 3 more years? It can like feel ambiguity, especially in B2B, when you have to make a very secure choice, and you know how it goes. You cannot be fired if you hire IBM. And these are like the risks that we are accounting for. So I would definitely have some sort of paid offer, even if a dummy one. No need. No need. Just like to show that you are a serious business and that you are in it for a long term. That's possible. And just like when it comes to different pricing packages, you can even say that like it is an early bird price, and it is just like available to first
Hmm.
200 users of the platform. That like this is your way of saying gratitude that something will do. But definitely think about pricing in the business model from the get-go, because otherwise you could be having like 500 users and a lot of costs for servers and no revenue coming in, and then like you would magically write, hi, from now on we are charging, and people would be, no, we use this product for free. Why are you punishing me? We like it, but like we don't necessarily want to pay for it. So it's all about the habit creation. And also an additional remark is that a lot of us product makers, we give too much of the product for free out. The value is over delivered. Like literally, we are robbing the customers of even having a choice to pay for the premium services. So when it comes to just like engineering, what is the added value of that must be captured in your free version of the product? In order to deliver value, we can overgive there as well. So be very strategic, be very purposeful about what are the wow feature or what is the critical mass of usage. And there is no clear answer how to do this. You can only use this from doing like your own customer analytics and talking with customers. Nobody will give you a cooking recipe how to do this. It's not a cookie cutter.
That's maybe we could probably end it at that. Be purposeful about your pricing. So, Maya, such a wonderful conversation today. We started off with
Yeah. Oh
growth
my
and
God, I'm just
PLG,
warming
and then
up. Are we
I
finishing
know, I
already?
know, I know. We are out of time, and then I'm happy to post back, and we should probably talk and riff more about
Okay.
pricing.
So where to ship this art for 30 euros? I sold
Absolutely,
it
to
today.
US, to Seattle.
No, it will shipping will cost me more than I heard for this one,
I
so
was just
you're
about to
not
say
getting
that.
it. I
I was
will
just
keep it.
about to say. Oh, well, thank you so much, Maya, for your time. One last question:
That's
how does
precious.
someone reach out to you?
LinkedIn, go to gtmstrategist.com and grab a free chapter of my book. You see that like there is a lot of science into that. I've been working with some really cool companies on this: HubSpot, Miro, Figma. Don't want to name drop, but they are really amazing. So you know what is it with this GTM and pricing and everything? This
Yeah,
knowledge is not taught in business school, right? We are co-creating this together as a community, and I appreciate it, like this conversation so much, because it's just like these are the thoughts that we are developing as we are sharing examples and we are trying to search for patterns. There is no like Kotler like marketing book for it. And luckily, it is not, because our space is changing at a faster rate than ever. And the only way how can we win it is to share knowledge and experience to each other.
thank you for doing this, Maya, and to all the listeners, visit gtmstrategist.com and grab a free chapter. I'm guessing if you are nice to her, she can actually send you more chapters to review as well. Again,
Oh, you're negotiating. You're
there you go,
negotiating.
there you
Always
go.
be selling. No, I don't mind. I mean, I'm literally here to help. So I'm getting amazing feedback from the folks so far. And if somebody needs something, of course, like you can ping, and I will either like help you myself or direct you to the right person, because I know how it feels from the get-go when there are so many unknowns. And hey, whoever has been there before, I think that all of us have the empathy to just like be decent and respond to emails, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And to all the listeners, if you enjoyed today's discussion, please do consider leaving your review in the podcast platform of your choice. We'll be posting it on all of the podcast aggregators. Your feedback makes a big difference to us. And stay tuned for all the insights. We'll have more guests and more demos. Until next time, keep thriving.
can't wait. So who's next?